the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're getting real close to the NFL draft. We're getting dangerously close to the NFL draft. And for the second time this offseason, I dropped a mock draft. And before we dive into what the picks were and, my process in selecting them, I think it's real important to know that I only drop maybe 3 or 4 mock drafts an offseason. And that's because I just look at it as I want to be as accurate as humanly possible with these things. I don't want to be a guy that is just tossing out names and saying, oh, well, this week, this is what it kind of feels like. No, I want to have a real understanding of where the Pittsburgh Steelers are headed and what their draft could look like and put that on paper, because to me, this is a competition. I want to be the best mock draft. I want to get these picks right. Most of the time, I'm close to a degree on a lot of these picks. I know a lot of people in this industry are real good at it. A lot of people are not good at it. I try to pride myself on getting at least a couple right every year. This time, mock draft number 2 changed completely from mock draft number 1. Mock draft number 1 was Armarius Mims. From there, you traded up for Kool-Aid McKinstry. You landed Zach Frazier. I mean, it was nonstop. It was nonstop superstars in this draft. This one seems a little bit different. The Pittsburgh Steelers have kind of shown a little bit of the direction that they're heading in and where they intend to go with their 6-7 picks in the draft. I believe it's 6 picks in the draft. My mock draft starts with a center. And I know a lot of people say, hey, Steelers aren't going to go center in the first round. They're not interested in a center in the first round. I think that when a center presents itself in the first round, there's going to be no passing it up. That if they have an opportunity to select the next Marquise Pouncey, they will select the next Marquise Pouncey. They won't hesitate to do so. My first round pick is Graham Barton. I feel like that's a name that, a month ago, I wasn't totally sold on. I viewed him as a really good second round pick, potentially the second best center in the draft. I thought Jackson Powers-Johnson was going to be the guy flying off the board. Now it's Jackson Powers-Johnson might have some snapping issues. You never know if he's going to be the first guy or the third guy or where he's going to fall. Graham Barton tests like a freak at Duke. Arthur Smith's there watching. They need an offensive lineman. They're comfortable with Dan Moore. They don't want Dan Moore to be their starter, but they're comfortable with it. I don't know how comfortable they are with Nate Herbig, and even though they keep saying it, I'm not totally sold that he's going to be the guy that they allow to be a center for a full season with no backup, no real support, no real number 2, nothing. I think Graham Barton's there. I don't think you could go in a different direction. Am I crazy to think that they'd fly and run up to the podium if Barton is available at pick 20?
I'm not going to lie. That one surprises me a little bit. Now, you have your finger on the pulse much more than I do, but Graham Barton's not a name, especially early in the draft process, that was getting a lot of shine in the center realm. I mean, it was Jackson Powers-Johnson, like you mentioned. It was Zach Frazier out of West Virginia, like you mentioned. It was Cedric Van Pran out of Georgia. Graham Barton was kind of that number 4 that was sitting on the back burner. To hear, Steelers first round Graham Barton, again, this process changes very much throughout the last couple of months. In the next couple of weeks, it'll change even more. But that certainly surprises me. It's not a name that I had on my radar as much as, being a first round pick, especially.
Yeah, so I agree, and I think a lot of people are viewing it the same way. Is it, are you going to take a center in the first round, and if you're not going to take Jackson Powers-Johnson? Look, I think that the Steelers are going to find themselves with a couple of options, but I think the big names are going to be off the board. I think you're going to be looking at Armarius Mims, Graham Barton, maybe Nate Wiggins at pick number 20, and then a bunch of wide receivers. And I see the Steelers looking at this and saying, look, we could go Mims, and Mims has an incredible ceiling, but I don't think anybody knows what the ceiling of Graham Barton is. I think that people are just kind of guessing, and they look at him as a month ago, the ceiling wasn't super high. Now it's, wow, this could be a freak athlete at center. This could be a Tyler Lindenbaum. This could be a Creed Humphrey. This could be the next guy. The Steelers are going to look at that, and they're going to say, look, we're not going to take a risk in a position that we desperately need with an offensive lineman and say Armarius Mims is going to come in here and maybe it's going to work out, but maybe the injuries are going to keep him back. I could see if Mims wasn't dealing with injuries, if this was an injury-ridden offensive tackle, if this was a guy that was 6'8", 300 plus pounds, super athletic, coming in here and he just never got an opportunity because Georgia was so good, that's a totally different story. That's a Broderick Jones. You're going to get a Broderick Jones. You're feeling really good about a Broderick Jones. If it's injuries, you're looking at it and you're going, is he going to be able to hold up? Does he have the potential to be a serious bust because he just doesn't ever stay healthy? When you have an option like Graham Barton, who's a sure thing, go get a sure thing. It's the same argument with Mims and Fuaga, with people saying, well, Fuaga's floor is higher, but his ceiling is lower. Yeah, I 100% agree, but how big of a difference is that? I don't think it's significant enough not to go after the guy that's more of a proven commodity, and I think Barton's a name that's there. I see people saying that he might go before 20. There's no chance that I think a guy like that makes it to 51. I think there's a real chance everybody tries to avoid centers until the second round, just like they did the Creed Humphrey year, just like they do a lot of years, just because I don't know, center's just not as valuable of a position as people want to make it out to be, I guess, as I believe it is. Like it's the leader of your offensive line. That guy's got to get you. The Steelers watched what a bad center can do to them all year last year. The year before that with Mason Cole, and then the year before that with Kendrick Green. Like this was not a situation that I think they want to avoid. I could see Barton going in the first round. Round 2, I think it becomes a little bit crazier. A name that I don't think a lot of people have as their number 2 pick, but a name that I've been told right from the jump. I mean, I was talking to you and Steven at the NFL Combine, and we were talking about names that I've been given and people that I know the Steelers are interested in, and Max Melton was a name that popped off that board, and like they've just ran with it. They brought him in for a pre-draft visit. What makes Max Melton so interesting is that he fills 2 needs with 1 at 1 pick. You look at him and you go, that's an inside guy as a rookie. That's an outside guy as a second-year player. And then you kind of decide where he's going from there. Because this year, you have Dante Jackson, you have Joey Porter Jr., put those guys on the outside. Max Melton could come in here, and he's physical, and he's fast. He ran a 4.39 at the NFL Combine. He could play both inside and out. You put him on the inside this year. He reminds me of a faster, more athletic Cam Sutton. And I think that's massive for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's what they're looking for. I don't know. You hear Max Melton, round 2. Am I crazy there? We're going back-to-back kind of wild picks here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think at this point in the draft, it's starting to shake out where, you know, you kind of got to scratch some of these massive names off the list and say there's a pretty good shot they're not coming to Pittsburgh. They're looking elsewhere.
It is interesting because it's kind of in the same vein as a Graham Barton, where early in the process, you're looking at him and saying, oh, that's a nice third round pick if you go other directions. But I do remember, you know, obviously contributor to All Steelers Talk, Nick Martin, was down at the Senior Bowl talking to Max Melton. And it sounded like him and the Steelers had a lot of, you know, interaction at the Senior Bowl, which is the very beginning of this process. So to hear that they've kept up with him tells you that they're extremely interested in this guy. Now, where his positional value is, where he lands as far as other defensive backs, that's a different question for a different day. But I do really like Max Melton, not to mention Rutgers defensive backs have been really good over the last couple of years. So it might be an underrated, might be a name that not a lot of people have heard throughout this. It's not a superstar from the SEC like a Wiggins, or sorry, Wiggins is ACC, but like a Kool-Aid McKinstry or Terry and Arnold. But I do really like Max Melton, especially you mentioned for the needs. We've been talking slot corner for the last week and a half. That's a rookie that you can put in there. And I think that would be, like you said, a good use of a draft pick being able to fill multiple roles in the future.
Here's what I want to talk about next. Size matters. We all know it, and it's important to remember it in times of need. I recently went to a small law firm in hopes of getting the compensation I felt I deserved. I didn't, and to this day, I still think about the money that I may have missed out on. I filled out mounds of paperwork, then waited around for what felt like forever, got phone call after phone call telling me what I did not do right in the process, and it was expensive, all to get underwhelming compensation and almost zero satisfaction. Fortunately, if you ever get seriously injured and want to file a claim, you don't have to go through the same hassle I did. Instead, you can make it way easier by finding out if you have a claim in just a few clicks on your phone and working with America's biggest injury law firm with a promise of being for the people. Here comes Morgan & Morgan, today's sponsor. Morgan & Morgan has over 1,000 attorneys working in all 50 states fighting to get their clients the money they deserve. In recent months, they've achieved verdicts for their clients, including one that is worth $26 million. That is 40 times the highest insurance offer. And they're absolutely free unless you win. I got lowballed. Don't make the same mistake I did. Fighting big companies takes a big firm. And with America's biggest injury law firm, you're ready to take on insurance companies of any size. Don't overthink it. You can start your claim in just a few clicks by following the link in our description or by going to www.forthepeople.com/allsteelers. It only takes a few minutes to find out if you have a case. And if you have, it might be worth millions. That's what I'm saying. I look at it and it just presents a need right now and in the future. It's a guy with a ton of upside. He's not, I think that the difference is you look at a lot of slot corner options in this draft and you say, that's it. They're just slot corner. They're short. They're not as fast as you'd like them to be. It's just not going to work out on the outside. Melton's a guy that, you're just trying to get him on the field. You're looking at him and saying, I just want this guy to be out there because he makes plays. He comes up with interceptions. He hits hard. I think that he works on the inside as a rookie, and then you allow him to develop as part of this team. And then you hope that a guy like Corey Trice takes a step forward and Darius Rush takes a step forward, and maybe you add another corner in free agency at some point to be your number 3 on the outside, or maybe your number 2 on the inside if you want Max Melton to bounce outside. But I think that those two names make a ton of sense. I know that it's not the Kool-Aid and the Amarius Mims, that it was in my mock draft number 1. But I'm telling you, I think these guys make even more of an impact right off the bat for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I feel really, really good about the direction that they're going in. And I think that they're showing their hand a little bit when it comes to these top 2 picks. I want to answer this because this is a fun little experiment here, a little question on alternatives to these first 2 picks. Fauga or DeJean at pick 20. Corley, Pearsall, Leggett at 51. Who are we picking? All right, let's start with pick number 20. Fuaga versus DeJean. I mean, you know my answer. There's no question. There's no question to me. This is Cooper DeJean. I think Cooper DeJean, he tests like a freak. We're going to dive into that in a little bit. I think that this dude is one of the best prospects in the NFL or in the NFL draft. I think this dude's going to fly up the board at some point. I think that Cooper DeJean is a name that he's making an impact on your roster in ways that you didn't expect. Like I could see Cooper DeJean being a guy that comes in here and we're halfway through the season and people are talking about, man, this guy might win Rookie of the Year. Like he could win Rookie of the Year, and maybe he like somewhat revolutionizes the cornerback position because he's allowed to play punt returner and kick returner. He's next, I guess not revolutionizes, but he's a generational type talent. I think he's got that type of upside. I think Cooper DeJean is unbelievable. Don't get me wrong, Fauga is a dude who he might be the best right tackle in the NFL draft, and I think the Steelers are getting a sure thing in him. But I think the Steelers are getting a sure thing in Cooper DeJean, and I think the upside of Cooper DeJean is so much higher. When it comes to the 3 at 51, I think Leggett is the only realistic, like the only guy that's definitely going to be there or definitely going to go around 51. I think the other 2 could fall to the 3rd round maybe. But if I had to pick between those 3, I'm going Malachi Corley. I think Malachi Corley's a stud, back-to-back 11 touchdown seasons, 2,000 yards. I don't know where my brain's going with these numbers right now. 2,000 yards in the last 2 years of his college career. Western Kentucky guy. You know that just jumps off the map for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's got the ability to play inside and outside. He's speedy. He's physical. He's a yards after catch machine that I think the Steelers could utilize really, really well. And I think he's very much so on their radar. Let's toss the question to you. You going DeJean, Fuaga, or you going what one of these wide receivers you going with?
In the first round, I'm going with Fuaga. DeJean, you've mentioned it. He's potentially a generational type prospect, but potentially for a defense that has their cornerbacks right now and has a lot of stars on their defense right now, I would probably tend to go with the offensive line simply because, one, Fuaga is an absolute animal coming out of Oregon State. And secondly, we've seen over the last couple of years, and that has become more of a fact of life, that you win Super Bowls through their lines on the offensive and defensive side. And the Steelers, if they're able to fill a massive hole on the right side and move Broderick Jones to the left side and have those 2 staples on the outside moving forward, I think that's going to be a much higher position of need, in my opinion, than bringing in another cornerback, even if it's somebody as good as a Cooper DeJean, because you have your number 1 right now in Joey Porter. I think you have that. And whether or not DeJean is better than Joey Porter to me is irrelevant, because I think Fuaga is better, miles better than what you're going to get with a Dan Moore and Broderick Jones on his offside type of combination. So I would 100% go with Fuaga in that situation. And then as far as the receivers are concerned, I really like Leggett out of South Carolina. Now, Malachi Corley is an interesting receiver, but like you mentioned, at 51, the better positional value, the better draft stock value is getting Leggett, who I think is slightly better and has obviously gone up against a little bit better competition. So you have an idea of what he looks like against that higher level of competition. So in the third round, I would go with Leggett over those other two.
So look at I like these picks. Fuaga is a good name. I think Fuaga is a stud, and you're right that you win in the trenches. I can't argue that one, even though DeJean's my dude. And look, you're spot on with Leggett. I mean, like, if we're gonna be realistic about 51, and I don't think the Steelers are looking at 51 to add a wide receiver, but if you're looking at a wide receiver in 51, I mean, Leggett's the option. You know, Malachi Corley's my favorite of the three, but Leggett's the guy that's realistically, if you're thinking about picking in the second round, he's the one that you're going to go with, because the other two, that's a reach. Pearsall, I think, is going to fall. I think Pearsall might be there with like 98, let alone 84. And I think Corley, he should be there at 84. He might go just before it, but I think there's a shot that you have an opportunity to get those guys. I could see both those options. I think, let me ask you this. Is there a better shot that DeJean or Fuaga falls to 20?
I think there's a better shot that, that's a hard one. That's a hard one, because DeJean obviously got to put himself on a pedestal 2 weeks before the draft over the weekend or earlier this week. So I think that's a tough one. I would say it's probably a guy in Fuaga. I would assume Fuaga, simply because, as you've mentioned, whoever gets the last laugh on these pro days or whatever typically is the one that sticks a little bit higher. And DeJean, in a class that I would think is a little bit deeper, in my opinion, than the offensive tackle depth, I would say that DeJean stays up there a little bit more. It's tough. It's tough, because I think both of those guys are can't miss prospects, and guys that probably, I would think, go in the top 15. But again, it's going to be tough. It's going to change in the next couple of weeks, but I would say it has to be Fuaga over DeJean.
Yeah, I look, we'll dive into Cooper in a second here, but I don't think either of them have a real shot to fall all the way to 20. Although it would be phenomenal. It'd be phenomenal if they did. Let's round out this draft here. My mock draft 2.0. Then we'll move on to Cooper DeJean, answer some questions, keep it trucking. Malachi Corley I have in the third round, followed by Mason Smith, who I think is the biggest stretch that I have here. The biggest, I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but I hope it does happen for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mason Smith is a dude. I mean, look, I was told right from the jump, and it's hilarious, actually, because I read it in his scouting profile shortly after, but somebody very, very early in this process told me, they said, hey, look, Mason Smith reminds me of Stephon Tuitt. And I went, the Steelers would like a Stephon Tuitt. They would very much so enjoy another Stephon Tuitt. And then it popped up in his thing, and I said, all right, that's a name to watch. I think the Steelers love Mason Smith. I mean, me and you were joking that back at the NFL Combine, I was given a list of names that said, hey, look, these are names to watch. On that list, it was Mason Smith, but it wasn't spelled correctly, and I was looking around because I had no idea who this guy was at the time, and I was just going, I don't think Mason Smith exists, pal. I don't think he's a real human being. Now you look him up, I think he's my favorite to go as their defensive line pick, and I think in the third round, I think that's an option for him. Then I have Mac Goncalves, who we talked about on Monday, and I think is a sleeper for the Steelers. And they finish out with Josh Proctor, defensive back out of Ohio State, and Taj Washington out of USC, who I think are two great prospects to end with. Taj Washington is a run blocker at 5'10", and this dude works in the middle of the field well. He creates good separation. He's not fast. He's not big, but he does the rest of it fine, and I think the Steelers are looking for something like that. So I'm all about it. I think those are that's where I stand today with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Look, it's not flashy, but the Steelers, they don't usually go flashy, and they pull off some pretty good drafts sometimes, and I trust that Omar Khan is going to do some things to really juice up what this team is looking for.